In this nugget, I want to walk you through in a lab environment how to take a VM that we have in our inventory and clone it to create yet another VM. Now, a question may come up, well, if we're going to clone from this VM, we'll call it VM number 3. Does that VM have to be powered off? And the answer is no. We could clone from the VM if it's powered off. That's certainly possible. But we can also clone from a VM that is powered on. So together, we'll demonstrate both of those options. And then I'd like you to practice hands-on in the provided lab. So we'll start by launching the vSphere web client. There's a shortcut for it right here on the desktop. We'll provide our username, our password, and we'll click Login. And let's also take Chrome and put it full screen. So to clone from a VM, let's go take a look at our VMs. So we could do it here in the Host and Clusters view. We could expand, for example, ESXi3. And there's a couple of our VMs. Or we could click on the VMs and Template tab right here. And that would show us our folder of VMs right here. So let's start off by cloning a virtual machine that is not powered on. Let's use VM3 as an example. We'll right click on Linux-VM3. And from the drop down, we'll select Clone. And we'll choose from the submenu Clone to a virtual machine. And let's name this VM-4. And for the location, let's expand the data center, and let's put it in the VMs folder with the others, and click on Next. As far as the host, let's put this one on ESXi2. So with ESXi2 selected, we'll click on Next. For the storage policy, let's go ahead and choose Thin Provisioned, and let's put this on the iSCSI data store. So we'll select iSCSI, and click on Next. We'll customize the VM, and we'll also power it on when we're done, and click on Next. Next, we'll select our custom specification that we created in a previous nugget and click on Next. We'll look at the summary and click on Finish. So we'll give that a moment to deploy and power on. We can look at the recent tasks and see that it is in process. And when it's done, what we'll do is let's take VM4 as a powered on virtual machine and we'll clone from VM4. And again, a heads up, whenever we're doing a customization specification with a deployment, especially if it's Windows, it's very likely it's going to have to reboot a few times to deploy all those customizations. So if you're going to clone from a VM that's running, that just got deployed itself, you'd want to make sure that it's completely baked and ready to go before we clone from it. Alright, and now that that is done, we'll go ahead and minimize the recent tasks. Let's go ahead and click on Refresh up here on the vSphere web client. And there is VM4. And let's open up a console to that desktop. So we'll make sure it's completely done before we clone from this running VM. Alright, I'm going to press F11 to take it out of full screen. And let's go back to the vSphere web client. And let's clone from that VM4. So we'll right click on the running VM4. And from the menu for VM4, we'll hover over Clone. And then we'll clone to another virtual machine. And we'll call this one VM5. And we'll specify that we want to put it in the data center. Specifically, we'll put it in our folder in that data center called VMs. So we'll select that and click on Next. And let's put this one on, let me go ahead and just put that in the work in progress area just for a moment. I just want to verify where VM4 is running. So VM4 is currently on ESXi2. So let's go back to our work in process to resume that. And we'll click on the VM4 clone existing virtual machine. And let's go ahead and put this new virtual machine on ESXi3. Once we cover Distributed Resource Scheduler, we can actually have vSphere take a look at all the ESXi hosts, and based on utilization of the host, Distributed Resource Scheduler can decide automatically which ESXi host to place a new virtual machine on. So until we do DRS, we're going to have to do this on our own. So let's go ahead and put it on ESXi3 and click on Next. For the storage policy, we'll specify Thin Provisioned. Let's put this also on the iSCSI data store for this new VM and click on Next. And let's do the customization as well. We'll power it on, click on Next, and then we'll specify our custom specification right there and click on Next. And then click on Finish, and it'll go ahead and it's off to the races. So in a few moments, if we click on the recent tasks, it'll show us the deployment of that new virtual machine. It'll power it on, it'll apply the customizations, and then once it's done, we'll have yet another VM that we've cloned from an existing VM, except this time it was a running existing VM. So that says complete. Let's go ahead and minimize that back down. We'll click on VM5, and with it selected, we'll go ahead and bring up a console. Alright, so this is VM5. If we close that console, and we go back to the vSphere web client, and bring that console back up, the automatic screen resizing should kick in, so it's using all the real estate. So that looks great. We can also test that. Let's click on the mouse in the upper left-hand corner and click on Terminal Emulator. And let's just do a ping out to google.com. And if that works, which it is, and we'll do a Control-C to stop that, that's a good sign. So DNS is working, connectivity to the outside world is working, and why shouldn't it? The original machine that we cloned from was working, and as a result, this one should too. So let's go ahead and close the terminal window, and then we can gracefully shut down both of these VMs right here in the vSphere web client by simply selecting them, and we could right-click, hover over power, and select Shutdown Guest OS, and yes. And for VM5, we'll select that. And with VM5 selected, and if you click on VM5 or you click on anything that's not responding quite like you think it should, just do a refresh. And when you click on refresh, hopefully anything that should be on this display that isn't will be corrected with that refresh. So with VM5 selected, we can use the shortcut here for shutdown of the virtual machine. And because it has VMware tools installed, that makes it possible for that graceful shutdown. So we'll shut down VM5 as well. Click on yes, and it's on its way down. So now, what I'd love you to do in the hands-on lab is practice cloning two virtual machines. One from a VM that's powered off, and the other from a VM that's powered on. And then open consoles for each one of them to verify that they're working properly. So have some fun with the lab, and I'll see you in the very next video. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.